I told you I'd see you in hell.
This is the best scene in the Batman.
Take that, you friggin' psycho! I got you!
Or this one. Or maybe this another one. What these three scenes have in common is that all three approach what it means to be Batman from different points, representing the complexity of the character throughout his stories and what he can already achieve in a single story. The Batman is not an origin story, but how Batman finds himself and what he must represent and a path as a vigilante in Gotham. How Bruce evolves as a hero for the city by the end of the story to be his best self. Because to be Batman is to be himself. There is both a magic and a curse in adapting a character with more than 80 years of history. He has gone through multiple eras and been influenced by technological changes, political and social movements. He has passed through the hands of dozens, if not hundreds, of writers and artists, with changes in his costume, his values, his cast, reinterpretations of his origin, early years, late years, different genres and tones within the stories, film noir, martial arts, psychedelia, choral stories, analysis of the character as a hero and persona, crises, deaths, resurrections, even other characters besides Bruce Wayne have been Batman. When someone or a creative group in a medium other than comics wants to tell something about Batman or any of the DC or Marvel characters like Spider-Man, Daredevil or Wolverine, they can practically do whatever they want with the characters. If it's inked, it can be interpreted in another medium. Cause they are not adapting the character, including his entire world, which is practically impossible because of the number of storylines and the longevity of those storylines. They have to interpret the character by selecting a number of elements known in his iconography to create something new. A vision. At the same time, they have to bring a new iteration that can harmonize with some that most audiences have accepted. Or in extreme cases, as absolute adaptations of the character, such as Bruce Timm and Paul Dini's series from the 90s, or the Batman Arkham video game saga, to take examples not only from the film. They have to both get validation from the majority of the character's fans and at the same time make a new, unique adaptation that is interesting to fans and a general audience, make a good product, a good film. To take a contrarian example within the superhero subgenre, Invincible is the standalone story created by Robert Kirkman as main writer, Cory Walker and Ryan Ottley as cartoonist within the Image Comics publishing house. Invincible's story begins and ends in 144 chapters. In its adaptation into an animated series developed by the original main creator and Simon Racciopa, the ethnicity of some of the cast has been altered due to the dubbing cast and the importance of some characters in the comic has been redistributed, but the story is essentially and mostly the same. That is, they are making an adaptation. At a much higher level of change, which could be even considered a bad adaptation at several points, we have The Walking Dead, also written by Kirkman. And not only we can talk about the translation of the comic to another medium, we have the example of The Last of Us and its series as a good, or not for some, including myself, bad adaptation of the video game. But on the other hand, how do you adapt Super Mario? You put into the same film multiple allusions to the different adventures of the Plumber Brothers and the rest of the characters. Again, in this case in video games, in one case you have to adapt a story, and in the other you have to interpret the world of these characters who have too broad a set of stories in every sense of the word for the creators to stick entirely to one. The opportunity to explore the character with multiple sources of inspiration to enrich the story is unique. Even when there have been films or seasons under the subtitle of a particular comic book, they always play with the interpretations of the characters that work in film or TV format.
Thursday, October 31st.
To talk about Reeves' Batman is to detail these 3 scenes I presented at the beginning, 4 if we add his introduction. But for that, it is necessary to specify the elements of the character's iconography that the whole team and Reeves have been interested in using for this new, and so far, definitive Batman. The use of Bruce as narrator at both the beginning and the end of the film is one of the most important hallmarks of many of the characters' stories, such as in Frank Miller, Klaus Jansson and Lynn Barley's Dark Knight Returns, and is one of the most characteristic elements of superhero comics in general. It consists of the protagonist's internal narration of certain events and thoughts aloud to the reader, often revealing more about the character's motivations and philosophy than the actions the artist draw for him. As in the case of Rorschach written by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, where objectivism and the end over the means flood the character's thoughts. In this case, for the Batman, it helps the viewer immediately dive into Bruce's mind. When the signal is turned on, invoked for the murder carried out by Riddler, he awakens, and with him, his thoughts. It's a retelling of his diaries based on those of Kurt Cobain, giving insight into Batman's status as a vigilante, his stagnation after 2 years of nightly struggles, and his indiscriminate use of fear and violence as a weapon of deterrence. He is not a legend. It is not a symbol. It is a nightmare for them.
I'm vengeance.
This Batman fights impulsively, unrestrainedly, spectacularly in a realistic, raw choreography, but which allows itself certain licenses such as the resistance of his suit to the bullets and impacts familiar in John Wick. Is somewhere between the exaggeration of Zack Snyder's more comic book vision and the meticulousness and application of Nolan's military training, where emotions did not betray his Batman in combat, and when they did, he failed. Pattinson is effective on the ground, on small targets, on thugs, on scum. But the real problem is not them, not even the kingpins who control the city, which is why they let the Penguin go, who ironically will reveal Falcone at the end of the film. But it's about making the citizens, who live without hope and in fear, to make them understand that they can take back the reins of Gotham. But he is lost in seeing the main focus of his struggle for much of the story, like his own bat signal, smashed in the sky. Until he reaches that moment of clarity about his true purpose, there is a whole road ahead for this Bruce. Batman, as so many people in the industry have mentioned, is the definitive role within this subgenre of films. Even with having some of the most eccentric characters in his cast of villains and supporting characters, he is a character with a great capacity for psychological and acting exploration. Nothing pleases an actor more than a character full of pent-up emotions on screen, and with a presence on screen difficult to fill only with gym work or CGI. The proof is that even this is the least hypercyclical Batman of the last 3, it is likely to be the best directed on screen, therefore best acted, therefore most imposing. Keaton's Batman was theatrical in every aspect. Even though it was a great start for Batman in the cinema, and Batman Returns seems to me pretty superior than '89 film, it lacks, due to Burton's limitations and vision of the character, the sobriety that usually benefits the character. Nolan's vision of Batman and Christian Bale's interpretation of the character was one from the beginning trying to bring hope to the city and be a symbol. And even when the character was marked by the death of his parents, and at the beginning he was lost in his resentment, Rachel's character is really the one who moved Bruce to be his best self, to make certain decisions, and indirectly led him to stop being Batman, and at the same time to have nothing but Batman in his life. With all this conflict, even ended up breaking the relationship with Alfred, and ended his path as Batman to achieve his goal. That the city will learn to stand up for itself. All in all, aesthetically and in the way the camera is set up, it is a minimalistic interpretation of Batman in the available elements and his tricks to impose the criminals, reminding both in his way of fighting and the technology he used, as well as the figure of Rachel, more of a 007 trilogy like those of Daniel Craig's saga than trying to make a total adaptation of the myth of the Dark Knight. Best films, among the best of the decade, if not Dark Knight is the best both for the brilliance of the film and the legacy for the following ones, understanding so well the essence of the character as a symbol, but I don't think they were conceived specifically as trying to be the best possible interpretations of a comic book character, embracing all his iconography, from the aesthetics of the city, which in Nolan was at times more reminiscent of Hitch's Angels or a contemporary New York in its choice of locations, lacking the grime and gothicism that Begins had tried to convey, to the costumes and characteristics of its villains and other characters, which at times came across as more of a timid nod to the reader. Batfleck is physically the most brutal in both his Millerian design and in his crime fighting. He is a Bruce Wayne physically and especially mentally exhausted after more than 20 years of fighting crime, and his scenes in both Batman v Superman and Justice League elevate him as a Batman who, in terms of fight choreography, is the closest thing to the translation of a fight of his in the comics. Snyder also, even with the forced march of his universe, gives the character a logical journey, from being a man without hope, confronting even with Superman because of his own prejudice, he finds that defending flame in the figure of the Man of Steel, and later in the formation of the League as the heroes who will defend the Earth, and re-emerge again as a hero. With all this said of the previous best Batmans in cinema, Pattinson is up the screen in a different way. This Batman is more integrated into the city than any other. He uses his identity as a wanderer, also taken from year one, to patrol and be close to crime when it comes to donning the suit, making him more connected to the city. Even if he had a more elaborate Bruce Wayne identity, which in this film he has completely set aside for his other legacy, he knows how to camouflage himself with the city. He knows its streets and its people, how they dress, how they think, which adds more obsession to his crusade, and when he wears the suit, which is the vast majority of the film, further emphasizing this obsession, he never looks bad on screen. Not at all. When his figure is not blended into the shadows, making him almost impossible to see on screen, similar even to a horror resource, making him almost part of those darkest corners of the city, that it can come out of anywhere, and when the revenge figure is finally revealed, the criminal is lost. In any of these moments, the feeling for the viewer is that this Batman is omnipresent, just as the criminals feel. And to help the shot and Pattinson's delivery, that's where the sound work comes in.
Goddamn freak.
The sound design of an audiovisual work can make the difference between a good scene and a great scene, or even give veracity to a moment rework in post-production. The very marked sound of the footsteps, gloves and leather of Batman's suit at key moments, adding more weight and presence to Pattinson in the suit.
The mayor was up here alone. The killer may have come through the skylight.
With his entrance, when he arrives at the crime scene, in which all the wood he passed creaks, as if with each footstep, the agents present were more tense with the arrival of this madman in disguise into the scene.
This must be a favorite night of the year, huh, pal? Happy fucking Halloween.
Excuse me, Commissioner? They're ready for your statement.
And of course, the music used, both the twice heard Something in the Way by Nirvana, putting us in the skin of this emo Bruce Wayne, or the themes composed by Michael Giacchino with a reference to the funeral march for Batman and the serial killer theme for the Riddler, which further enhanced the performances and great scenes of the entire cast. There is a tremendously interesting stylistic decision to intentionally fog up the image constantly to give the feeling of that constant dampness from the rains and sewage in the city, giving a greater difficulty for the viewer to fully see the figures of the cast characters and Batman and Riddler, who at various times are among the darkness of the shot, and why not, to give a greater nightmarish air to the atmosphere. This is something that also makes Reeves' vision more interesting to me than the rest, the camera work. Burton's theatricality inspired by the monsters of the Universal, Nolan's with a more classical camera setup, or Snyder's with its saturation, remarking of blacks and flashes are all less stimulating to my eyes than Greg Fraser's photography. The thing is that the entire crew of the film tried to push the limits of what they could show on camera of the character, and to make it serve the narrative and the script, with a bunch of good decisions like few others in a film from a major like Warner, to give the most immersive Batman film. This is how you convince an actor like Robert Pattinson, from being part of one of the worst Hollywood franchises of his generation, if not of history, to restart his career from scratch from outdoor cinema with both demanding and, above all, outstanding performances in every film in which he has continued to appear or star. As a great example of his abilities as an actor, he starred in 2014's The Rover alongside Guy Pearce, the Safdie brothers' Good Time in 2017, and in 2019 he shared the screen with the great Willem Dafoe in Robert Eggers' incredible Lighthouse. In certain films, the story isn't everything, and one can still be a masterpiece or a great film with a discreet, or to use a better word, functional script. One can mention Blade Runner 2049 or especially the first part of Dune as examples of films that not rely on what they are telling the viewer to grab them, but on the audiovisual experience in which they are able to immerse them and turn that journey into very motif of the film. With a coherent script, less expository, with less dialogue, therefore, dilute among the best aspects of the film. I am talking about being films, as I have already mentioned, immersive, examples of cinematographic narrative. The 131 pages of the script written by Matt Reeves and Peter Craig seems to me an almost perfect one. This story is about Batman hunting down an assassin who is going after the corrupt figures in the town of Gotham. A story clearly, and admittedly by the writers, inspired by Seven and Batman The Long Halloween in wanting to give the story that noir aspect in which the Bat is accumulating clues or false clues, and facing different villains and characters with the detective inside a sort of witch train to find that Zodiac-like serial killer who is always one step ahead of him. So we have the genre of the film and the motivation of the vigilante. Batman must stop the Riddler. Reeves and Craig omit as such his origin and place the viewer in medias res of this Batman's journey as Gotham's protector. However, so that the viewer does not forget his origins and that Batman must be more than the rage that drives him to fight during nights, this Bruce Wayne is stuck with the crime in the city, stuck in his lack of social life, stuck in that trauma. It helps to this trapped psychology of the character in his trauma that, despite the Wayne's involvement in the case and how it affects Bruce, and even hurts Alfred, that the script focuses on being a Batman story. Ironically, the Bat is his true self, so in a cyclical way it's what helps him deal with the trauma, but because of its stagnation does not allow him to move on from it. It is also a film that promises to focus more on the detective side of the character, and it does. The fact that Batman doesn't manage to solve Riddler's riddles or stop his main plan to flood the city, I think is a positive aspect of this first film of more than a possible trilogy. Again, he is a character in the making, making mistakes like bringing Falcone out into the open, underestimating him at several points, like when Bruce and Alfred take the Rata Alada riddle as a mistake,
Rata Alada?
taking longer to track down the city's most corrupt person. While this is not a literal adaptation of Batman Year One or any of its origins, it includes interactions and introduces characters in similar ways, such as the character of Selina Kyle as a thief who works in a nightclub, even bearing a strong resemblance in iconography to Zoe Kravitz's costume and appearance in The Batman, complicating the plot not only as the classic tricky romance between the Bat and the Cat because of the opposite sides they tend to find themselves on, but she is directly related to the main plot in various ways, as in Long Halloween, giving her more layers as a character than she had in Dark Knight Rises or the strange but iconic version in Returns. Also introducing a Gordon still having to climb the Gotham police ranks as a lieutenant as he begins to collaborate with Batman. At this point at which the film is set is the moment where the character finds that way to get unstuck, both as Bruce Wayne, being closer to the figure of Alfred as the only thing like a father he has left, and Batman as he tries to be something more than vengeance. The Penguin scene represents that spirit of vengeance and that sort of demon that Bruce carries with him and that we also see portrayed in his perfect introduction as a character. This is a Batman who is extremely violent in his beatings, breaking bones, and even provoking an entire chase by provoking the Penguin. He almost seems to enjoy the violence, rather than the purpose for which he is imposing it. He seems, in the eyes of the criminals, physically unstoppable. This itself rhymes with the next best scene.
I've been invisible my whole life. I guess I won't be anymore, will I? They'll remember me now. They'll remember both of us.
The interrogation between the self-amassed Riddler after laying out all the pieces of the plan that Batman, unbeknownst to him until that scene, had been helped him lay out. The villain's understatement, which is reinforced by his physical appearance, is what has always kept him one step behind the assassin. Back in the scene, Riddler has always been in control. He is the first in the scene, and the first to speak. Batman remains in the shadows to intimidate him, but the Riddler looks up to him. He is part of his inspiration, as an equal. Masks created to reveal their true identities, as they have collaborated together on the plan of a lifetime to take down these corrupt figures of Gotham. We have seen throughout the film Bruce vacillate on the motivation of this killer and whether they should be punished or these people deserve the punishment meted out by Riddler, creating another conflict in the character for his figure in process as Batman. He still ponders whether to fulfill his mission in the city he should cross the line, and we see him relatively close to crossing it at several points. And in this scene, we see him powerless. He believes for several seconds that his identity is in danger. He is not in control. Batman has lost. Even though Riddler doesn't get to know his alter ego, he can't stop him. He hasn't been able to in any of his tests. Out there amidst the water and rubble, Batman faces for the first time the people who really need him. Because there are battles that can't be won with brute force, or technology, or even intellect. Sometimes it simply takes an act of courage. Sometimes a moral victory can lead to something more. A future.
Dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy, and I can't do that as Bruce Wayne. As a man, I'm flesh and blood. I can be ignored, I can be destroyed, but as a symbol, I can be incorruptible. I can be everlasting.
Even when the script skit involving the convenience of that cop at the crime scene in Riddler's flat to reveal the plan that Riddler had intentionally left under the carpet, I love the origin of this Batman. Of the new Batman that is born in the Batman for the following films. This is a man in constantly struggling with his legacy, something that is addressed in the film itself from the corruption of important families, including Wayne's under suspicion, from the legacy of both that child with parents murdered in Crime Alley and the identity that grew out of that tragedy, born out of hatred and thirst for vengeance. If I have mentioned and used footage from the Nolan saga to support the script of the video and the film, it is not because I believe that the Batman is an inferior interpretation of the myth of the character than the one made in this trilogy. Quite the contrary. Like Nolan, he reused elements of the mythology that Burton had created around the character, such as the certain theatricality, and made them his own to expand them in his trilogy with a hero who is practical and in a certain sense minimalist in his movements, and with a clear fixation on Bruce Wayne wanting to create a lighthouse to guide the citizens of Gotham to finish his crusade. Reeves knows everything the viewer knows about Batman in the movies, which is why in scripting decisions he skips telling the character's origins, embraces the symbolism imposed by Nolan around the cowl and the citizens as an end to restore the order in Gotham, and sets this new Batman on a totally new and interesting canvas in a single film. That's why I prefer the Batman to the Dark Knight, because from my perspective of what I have experienced and what I have held onto from my vision of the character I have grown up with, it's the best compendium of what Batman means to me, of Bruce Wayne, and all of his world and complexity, to create, so far, the definitive interpretation of the character on film.